Greetings, cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. Thanks for joining me for part 2 of session 3. Let's go ahead and get into it. What was your question again? Well, if you could explain the difference in terms of life and death. Okay, I think we should go a little further with that. Life and death. I can't say strongly enough that death of the vehicle, death of the body, or losing the body, losing the vehicle, essentially has no long-term effect on me. It can put me out of the classroom circumstance for a period of time. Now, this gets into a discussion of when I'm out of body, if I'm connected with our Heavenly Father's kingdom, there are a number of choices that our Heavenly Father's kingdom can make. He reads me out in his computer, and he looks on his meter and he says, that soul's worth saving. It just got kicked out of that vehicle in that accident on the freeway. It certainly isn't just a waste. It certainly still has some goodness in it. So we're going to put it aside over here, or we're going to put it on ice, so to speak, or we're going to save it in some condition. I had to remind myself how T had passed away from liver cancer because Doe really keeps using this same method of death, the accident on the freeway. In other words, our Heavenly Father's kingdom can actually take that soul, set it aside, and wait until they feel it is the appropriate time to put it back into the earth condition, into the classroom condition, into the human kingdom. Think of the human kingdom as a stepping stone on our way to Heavenly Father's kingdom, if you make the right pursuits. Because you can also go through the human kingdom and with the wrong pursuits, get out of that kingdom and be in an advanced human kingdom that's outside the age of the earthly environment you knew and can be seen as heaven, and other humans may see you as a heavenly creature with heavenly skills and heavenly capacities, but it won't be our Father's kingdom? Wait, is there a hell, but it's like a counterfeit heaven? And then other people can see you as an agent of that counterfeit heaven? I'm going to call it Nevin, not heaven, just so to save me some time. So we've got heaven and we've got Nevin. We've got Creator God and we've got Creator Satan. We've got people in the Father's kingdom, and then we have people in the Nevin kingdom. Okay, so not only can you be seen, or can you pursue the wrong thing, thinking it's the right thing, but you can actually be uplifted in that wrong system in a way that you think that you're doing the right thing. I mean, part of the reason that is explained to us earlier in the book, part of the reason we're here on Earth is so we realize that there's something wrong with Earth and we try to reach out for something better. But now he's saying that you could actually get so far in the Nevin kingdom, you can get so far being filled with the mind of Lucifer, that you actually not only think that you're doing the right thing, but you're pretty damn convinced. And everything that you look around you and see shows signs that you're doing the right thing. Other people also recognize you as doing the right thing too. Now, the whole thing or situation that is created that is negative, that is fallen, that is away from God, is to make us realize this is wrong, this is negative, this feels bad, I should reach out to God. And when you do that, God starts to respond to you, unless Satan interferes for whatever reason. Or to put it very simply, life sucks, you recognize it sucks, you reach out to God to make it suck less. That's the idea. So how can you get so far in this suctitude that you actually believe it's goodness? Because now there's no way that you would ever reach out to God. The whole purpose of life being terrible is that you recognize it's terrible, you recognize the system sucks, and you reach out to God to help you with the system. So how could God allow you to get so far in another system that you mistake it for goodness, and therefore you will never reach out to ask God for help because you see everything around you as good? This makes even less sense than regular Christianity. That's hard to do. And you can move into a camp that will easily take the responsibility of creating religions and all of that. They will also give you concepts of life extension. Now, there's a big difference in what this other camp calls life, the reason this terminology of death and life got all messed up in the beginning. In our Father's kingdom, when you really get to be a full-fledged or badge-wearing member in our Father's kingdom, not in the human kingdom, but having graduated from the human kingdom, and you are in our Father's kingdom, you take on a suit of clothes. You take on a vehicle that is imperishable and incorruptible. As long as it is sustained in an advanced, incorruptible, imperishable environment, it cannot be destroyed. You have eternal life. Not only does the soul have life, but you can wear a vehicle that, for all intents and purposes, doesn't need to decay. It doesn't have any age, it doesn't come from a baby, it doesn't get old, and it doesn't need to be changed out for another one. There's no loss of consciousness. It doesn't mean that it can't be hurt and discarded. In certain circumstances, it can be injured, it can be hurt, it can be lost. You can go to the wardrobe and pick up another one, and there you will have a new set of clothes. To the best of your understanding, you will never again experience loss of consciousness because all that is you is that soul in there, which still has control of free will, that can still make choices, that can still recognize mind stuff as it comes from our Father's kingdom, and is trying more to eliminate the mind stuff that comes from Lucy's corporation, his misinformation camp. That's interesting. So you can actually be in the Father's kingdom, and you're never fully free of Lucifer. That is an interesting thing, that Lucifer can still pollute and possibly corrupt you in heaven. So the human body dying or losing the body is not a true death any more than when a tulip plant as a perennial comes to the surface and the freeze comes, does that plant die? No. Only what showed died, but what still remained was, in a sense, the genetic package of the soul, the continued existence or further opportunity for the soul to take a shell in order to learn lessons. Souls and spirits in a discarnate condition cannot learn lessons. That's the way our Heavenly Father has designed it. They cannot learn lessons. Even Lucy's camp knows there are limitations to what a soul can learn in the discarnate condition. What do we mean by discarnate? We're speaking of a soul or spirit outside of a vehicle, whether it's a vehicle in the human kingdom or a vehicle in the kingdom of heaven. The discarnate can serve Lucy's camp. He can be someone that can be standing right here beside me at this moment from Lucy's camp, trying to interrupt my thinking, trying to get me off track, trying to get me to stop asking questions as we talk to my father, and to interfere with this task. You know what would help with that, Doe? A script. And I'm sure there's one standing here at this moment, even though I don't like to acknowledge his presence. It interferes with me the moment I even acknowledge his presence in order to have you understand that in a discarnate condition, lessons cannot be really learned. You are confronted with addictions, ties, all the misconceptions and their application only when you're in a physical body. Now, Lucy's camp, they're pretty good at robbing bodies. They're pretty good at even using bodies for what they want to use them for and then discarding them. Even though our Father's camp created them, they are his product and he has the right to destroy them if he wants to, in a flash. He is much more restrained in how he would even permit any of his members to use bodies. He cares for them more. He protects them more. Okay, so God lets Lucifer rob bodies, use them, discard them, etc. But he doesn't let his own camp members, his own teammates, do the same thing to help counter all the damage that Lucifer is doing to the human kingdom. Again, what kind of God is this? Lucy's camp will influence you to do a task and not really get themselves that involved, try to get you to do the task for them. And they're convinced that they are doing themselves a big favor. They're also, in the process, putting themselves in a lesson opportunity circumstance, because when they're doing that, they are out of a body, or they're staying in their, this gets kind of awkward here, in their advanced form. It seems strange. It's very confusing to realize that Lucy has many, many members in Lucy's camp, can have what humans at this point in an age can see as unhuman vehicles. And you think, unhuman, they're heavenly vehicles? They're glorified bodies? They're physical bodies of the kingdom of heaven? No, that's not what I was thinking. I was thinking, what the hell are you talking about? You know, he's trying to explain it as a person who knows all of the details, not realizing that you first need to just get the gist of what you're about to learn. That session tapes 1, 2, and 3 should just be a brief overview, and then each tape thereafter should be something more in depth. But instead, he's trying to explain it simply while also coloring it and clogging this up with so much detail and so many questions that we're left with that he doesn't realize we're going to be left with, and that the students are not going to realize that we, the viewer, are going to be left with because they don't have those questions anymore. I mean, my main question here is when it says that they, the people in Lucy's camp, they're convinced that they're doing themselves a big favor when they try to convince us to do a task for them. A big favor in what way? I mean, what's the purpose of increasing Lucy's camp anyway? Is it because they realize that they're serving Lucifer and they hate the creator God? Or is it because they think that Lucy is God and that they're serving God, and that's why they think they're helping us out? Okay, at this point we have to go back and remember that when Satan was booted out of the household of our father's corporation, he had a heavenly body in the making. According to the record, he took a third of the heavens with him. Must have been a bunch of people. And they had heavenly bodies in the making. They also had a lot of technical, advanced information beyond human technology. They knew how to get from here to there in different means, certainly than humans in this age would know. They knew how to appear and disappear. They had a body that had all kinds of capacity that human flesh on this planet in this age do not have. Don't be confused. They are not heavenly bodies. Heaven is where our Father is. They were cast out of where our Father is. The moment they were cast out, they no longer had heavenly bodies. They had what was left of a partially completed heavenly body, a hybrid, similar to what would happen if a caterpillar were removed from the chrysalis before he became a butterfly. What do I mean by what was left? Well, once they were cast out of where our Father's camp is, they began to be in a condition of perishable, and what's the other term? Corruptible. Corruptible, that's right. The most normal conditions for them are corruptible and perishable. Their bodies become perishable, which is the only thing they're concerned with. They're not concerned with corruptible because they're on a different path of real knowledge. Once they become perishable, they even know it. If you read the records supposedly of people who've had encounters with space aliens, whether it's Adamski's camp, or we could sit and talk about that kind of stuff for some time, about so-called encounters of the third kind or the fourth kind, where they got information from space aliens that would say, it isn't exactly like you're told in your Bible. We do lose our bodies, but live a lot longer than your bodies. They might last several hundred years, or they might have an extension quite a bit longer than yours. That's interesting. I wouldn't say that I know everything about so-called encounters with aliens of the third kind or the fourth kind, but this is the first time that I can remember, maybe vaguely remembering one, where the aliens were referencing the Bible. Do you ask the alien, like, hey, your bodies are interesting, where do you get them? And then they just start talking about the Bible? Or do they just come up and tell you, it isn't exactly like you're told in the Bible, just out of context? You're like, what isn't? What part of the Bible? What are you talking about? Why are you space aliens reading the Bible on Earth? Therefore, the person who's hearing all that thinks he's listening. Wait, what? Therefore, the person who's hearing all that thinks that he's listening to the members of the kingdom of heaven, that he's coming to the reality of what the kingdom of heaven really is, and he's shocked by it. He thinks, wow, all those religious ideas I had were off base. Not realizing that the camp he's talking to created those off-base religious ideas, and even now is selling you, or selling that individual who's having that experience, on, I am from the kingdom of heaven. We did create those religions on your planet. We are trying to help you move up the ladder so that you could serve in our kingdom and help us in our pursuit of universal mind, cosmic consciousness, becoming gods. So again, we're running into that problem of this individual genuinely believing that they're getting closer to God. So why would they reach out to God for help? And if reaching out to God for help is the only way to actually get to the kingdom of heaven, then not only has this whole system been very screwy to begin with, but you're even more screwed. And that's master design? Okay. Wow. There are some identifying features of those vehicles that they wear. Not all of them, but some of them. Some of those vehicles they wear still have gender, still have age. Don't forget, Lucy and his camp retained a lot of their intelligence, a lot of their skill capacity, a lot of their technical proficiency. They know how to make spacecrafts. I'm sure, measured by our father's kingdom, their spacecrafts are pitiful in comparison, but even at that point that Lucy and his crowd left, they knew a little bit more than the Model T in comparison as far as spacecrafts are concerned. But they do know spacecrafts. So what is this, like a steampunk aliens going around everywhere? They know how to travel in space. They do know how to move into parts of the heavens that certainly humans on this planet still find closed to them as they try to get out of here a little bit, go to the moon, and then into this orbit and that one. We're just barely beginners, or the humans here are. Of course, they're really getting into a world that doesn't belong to them, and Lucy and his camp are circulating a world that does not belong to them. But they can't get into our father's community. That is still held separate. Most of them will either appear to be male or female in some quality, even though they might be losing some of their maleness or femaleness, frequently not of their own choice, but because when in outer space and you're outside of the vibration of a planet that has the kind of fertilizer and the ingredients that are primary to this garden, to this planet, they can lose their capacity to reproduce. Okay, well now we know that sexual reproduction is a byproduct of the vibration of Earth. Nothing else. And if you leave Earth, you will lose your capacity to reproduce. So they lose their capacity to reproduce. Not that they would want to, but in spite of their desires. So they have to come and rob vehicles. They have to do artificial insemination. They have to do genetic experimentation. Okay, so this is why some people are being abducted and experimented on. It's so they can get more vehicles. I know. I guess, yeah. That's when you have had enough, huh, Krampus? Now, as I said before, much of how they do on this garden, to what extent, and to what extent the reports that we've heard are true, I don't know the particulars. It has not been given to me to know them. And I feel, in a sense, it's our protection that we don't know them. But I do know that in our Father's kingdom, in a sense, everyone is the same age. I'm talking about the vehicle they wear. Because as long as they stay in that protected environment and do work in his kingdom, there is no aging. It's as if the vehicles are all the same age. They're indestructible, imperishable, and they can't be let off track. They can't be corrupted as long as they stay in our Father's kingdom. Okay, well then how does Lucifer's mind stuff get into the soul then? Or is it just the vehicles that can't be corrupt? So the soul can become corrupt and then want to leave the Father's kingdom, at which point the vehicle can be corrupted? I guess that's what they're saying. What do you think, Krampus? Nothing to say? Now, if you stay in this world that we would still call part of the heavens, it still has many members in it that are not part of our Father's kingdom. You want to use the occult tarot box as a pillow, Krampus? Oh yeah. Great. Krampus is doing occult tarot. Good job. Good job. Try to find our way before the Krampus has taken us off track. Now, if you stay in this world that we would still call part of the heavens, it still has many members in it that are not part of our Father's kingdom. And their vehicles then have to be concerned with age and protection because they don't have good enough control, even though they're working on it very hard, that would allow them to just go to wardrobe and pick up another vehicle. They're constantly or frequently trying to master the techniques of developing another vehicle. No, of developing wardrobe of developing vehicles. And here, again, they're trying to copy our Father's kingdom so that you wouldn't know the difference. Because in our Father's kingdom, there might be a number of different types of wardrobe or suits of clothes that souls could wear. There might be little ones, there might be middle-sized ones, and big ones. And they might have different shit. What is all this might? There might be, there might be, there might be. Why might there be? Don't you know? Don't you have a direct contact with T? And T is currently in your Father's kingdom. Can't you just tell you, oh yeah, there's exactly 2 little suits. So if I want to walk around being a short stack, I can do that twice. Why is it a might be? And they might have different shapes and different colored skin and certain different things. I'm sure that our Father's kingdom, if our Father's kingdom wants to use them, could certainly create what we would call robots in order to put certain things in certain areas if he didn't want to take a chance on losing a soul. So it's just an extended device. It's a technical advancement. Lucifer has his robots. He has his counterfeits. He has his copy of the things that are in our Father's kingdom, but they're always lousy. If they really got under the microscope by those who were in the know, they would know the copies couldn't cut it. They'd throw you in jail because they're counterfeit. Okay, it's because they do not have life eternal. They do not have incorruption. Now, this gets me into another topic that's on our list of questions. Incorruption. Well, let's go to our next question. Okay, before we go to our next question, let me just try to make sense of this. So it seems like Lucifer's camp trying to create vehicles, they're not able to do that, so they can create robots, which are counterfeit vehicles. Okay, a counterfeit vehicle.
Well, would you like to talk now about the term resurrection and how it has changed?
Okay, resurrection has a little different connotation than life or death. Resurrection is more like a condition that you could apply to a soul when it enters a vehicle and comes into life. This life is a lowercase l. Now, in order to come in, if a soul is entering a vehicle and it's coming into life, that means it must have advanced pretty far in getting rid of misinformation and bringing in real information. Because don't forget, life and truth are synonymous, and here life is capitalized. So if it's bringing in real information, it's an advanced soul. It's one that has a lot of teaching from our Father's kingdom and has made that choice. It, in a sense, is very close to overcoming. So that's it. That's the only way you get resurrected, is if you're already exposed to these teachings. So what if you don't get exposed to these teachings? What if you get tricked and you're somebody who genuinely follows the wrong religion with a sincere heart? Your soul just gets recycled? A couple of illustrations that we might think of. Let's take the Bible in the book of Revelation. It talks of the first resurrection and a second resurrection at the close of the age. If a group of souls comes in and they are advanced souls, they are from our Father's kingdom. They are alive. Now, being from our Father's kingdom meant that they once had to graduate into that kingdom, or that they're being protected in that kingdom because they have a few little major touch-ups to be done, so they'd be a good match to a vehicle of that kingdom, so that they wouldn't still have desires that could not be fulfilled by that wardrobe or that vehicle that they would get in our Father's kingdom. If a mind that is advanced in the ways of our Father's kingdom comes and takes a flesh body in the human kingdom, then it is brought into a body, it has brought that body into life. It is suddenly living. It has resurrected. It has taken a dead, worthless plant and turned it into the epitome of life. From a human's point of view, not from the point of view of our Father's kingdom, but from a human's point of view, it is the most alive thing around, and it possesses the most truth, the facts, that can be had. Now this is interesting because it says that they're basically graduating into the kingdom of heaven, but they can't be given a kingdom vehicle yet because they still have a few little major touch-ups, which is a bit of a strange phrase, right? They have a few little major touch-ups. Little major touch-ups. But the touch-ups are basically that the soul, for whatever reason, maybe still contains some mind stuff of Lucifer that can only be satisfied with a human vehicle and not a vehicle in the Father's kingdom. And so they don't allow it into that vehicle. But what if you don't want to indulge those actions? Isn't it better to have a vehicle that cannot indulge in those actions? That the thoughts might be there, but you can never act on them? Isn't that better? Or is that worse because it's going to perhaps push the individual to exit the kingdom of heaven with that kingdom vehicle, and then the vehicle becomes corrupted? I guess that can be bad. Not for the soul, but for the kingdom itself. Because if you still have some of those little major issues that Lucifer wants you to have, I guess if you take a kingdom-made, completed vehicle out of the kingdom of heaven, then you could still be susceptible to Lucifer's influence and then now take that kingdom vehicle into Lucifer's camp. So I guess it's a way to prevent that from happening, but I'm probably putting a lot more thought into this than he has. Now, I'm afraid that I need to get a little personal here, because in the same sense that we speak to you out there, those who are listening to these sessions, I might be mistaken, but the information that has been given to me suggests that you are going to be part of what the book of Revelation calls the second resurrection. In other words, in order for you to identify with the knowledge that is coming through us as we give it to you, and for you to recognize it as from our Father's kingdom, in order for you to recognize that knowledge means you have to have a lot of that knowledge already, even though it might be pretty well in a dormant condition. A lot of that mind to be in you, or slightly outside of your vehicle, craving to get in and wanting to take that vehicle. What? Okay, so basically, if you're listening to this VHS tape, then it means that something in you already wants to be spoken to. Whether it's something you remember, it's something that's been dormant from your previous incarnation, whatever it is, it wants to reach out. In a sense, if you do have some of that information, then you were once given a gift of migrating to where that information was. You received a lot of that information and you applied a lot of that information. At a given time when you lost a vehicle, the next level took your soul and put it aside carefully and protected it for the end of the age and said, now you can go back and finish up those little areas that you didn't have much control in because, whoops, here we get to another touchy point, because we're sending other representatives from the kingdom of heaven who can help you with the task of finishing up your overcoming, getting Lucy out of the way, developing muscle in not listening to him, learning the difference between the truth that can be gained through asking from the untruth or the misinformation that is fed to us without asking. The untruth always gets us back into the world, back into ties, back into addictions. Lucy's camp counts on keeping you drunk by having you addicted to the world. Addicted even in concepts, addicted in misinformation, not to say the least, addicted to the wrong kinds of things to put into your vehicle, whether it be drugs or booze or over-consuming, or the wrong kinds of patterns. Wrong kinds of patterns? Does it mean habits? Of course, we get into an element here that is also very, very touchy ground that we've all been through, but we have to eventually face it and is the worst drug of all. And that was the drug of when we choose. And I speak of we here, I speak as representatives of the offspring, of the family tree of Adam and Eve, that when they fell and they took on the responsibility of reproductive activity, then of course all the spirits that came into those vehicles down the chain of offspring also participated in that misinformation, saying, oh, God gave me this capacity to reproduce. Now, what I'm getting at, the worst addiction that exists is love. And the way it's written is, that exists is ... love? Question mark. Oh, I thought God was love. Lucy uses that term. He would even have you believe that sex is love. I'm sorry, that one's a lie. Ultimately, even though we have all been hooked on that same drug, we've all gone through that period. Don't forget, we took advantage of the hothouse. We took advantage of the negative. We took advantage of the fact that we were products of those who went astray. We learned from their lessons. We've overcome them. But still, sex is the strongest drug. There's not a drug, there's not a morphine or anything that is produced by chemicals or plants of this world as strong as this drug. It's interesting, there's not a morphine. So he's separating it from drugs and chemicals and plants. Okay, I guess, okay. We'll just let him talk. That drug requires that you even let one of Lucy's technicians in that department absolutely take control of your mind and have you possessed with the fulfillment of that act. He knows that as long as you participate in that drug, your capacity for recognizing the truth, or the facts, is just about as good as it is for someone who's had half a dozen martinis and you say to them, are you clear-headed? Can we really ever talk about significant information? And they say, and it says slurred voice, I was just as clear-headed as I ever am. I don't mean that just while in the act of that reproductive activity. I'm talking about as long as those reproductive hormones are active in your system, as long as they're still cycling, you will be working against the drunkenness of that drug. Now, this is not stated here, but this passage is of particular note because Applewhite or Doe and many of the male members had removed their male member. They've castrated themselves. So this idea that even those reproductive hormones that are active in your system. So if I'm just chopping off my twig and berries, obviously I'm not going to be making testosterone in my testes anymore because they have been detested, right? But what about for any of the female members of the group and their reproductive hormones? I mean, how were they stopping the production of estrogen? I don't think they did anything as invasive as surgery for the female members. At least if they have, I haven't read anything about it. Were they on some kind of hormone blockers? Or did they just really have to think it away? Now, I know that this could sound just as far out as anything could sound, but down in your heart, if you're from my Father's kingdom, you know that Jesus was not a sexual creature. Wow, that's a sentence that I never thought that I would say. Down in your heart, if you're from my Father's kingdom, you know that Jesus was not a sexual creature. His MO presented itself as one that Lucy would have you interpret wrongly. In other words, Lucy would have you think Jesus was pure, having never needed to overcome anything. But regardless of how Lucy would twist things, you know that he was pure. Wait, what? So we know that Jesus was pure, but Lucy would think that he's pure. So I know the idea is that Jesus had to overcome things, especially in a previous incarnation. That's how he even ascended to the level or the next level above human into the Father's kingdom, is having overcome stuff in the past. But it's interesting that they make that distinction that Jesus was pure, having never needed to overcome anything, but we know that Jesus was pure. It's just in another life he had to overcome a lot of stuff. Again, it's like a password, isn't it? All this misinformation and knowing the term but using it incorrectly and changing the definitions of terms. It is like a password. It's like if your password is Krampus, but Lucy has you spell it with a capital K, but really the Father's kingdom, it's all lowercase. Let's take the term virginity as another wrong application of terms. Lucy says that a virgin is someone that is pure, but he tacks on another addition to that definition. He says one who has never had sexual activity. Virginity, pure in the physical, yes. Correct definition. But virginity meaning someone who has never had sexual activity? No, wrong application, wrong definition. Therefore, I can recover my virginity. I can become a virgin. In a sense, someone who has never, if you really think of the soul's existence, who has never participated in it. They don't even know what there is to overcome about it. Unfortunately, we can rest pretty assured that there is no one on this earth age that has been lucky enough to not participate in it, save maybe a few isolated cases. Again, Doe is really showing himself here. Lucky enough to not participate in it. He so detests that he is a gay man. I'm not saying that our Father's kingdom says out of necessity you must stoop to participate in that and overcome it. Though it may be the case, it's safe to say that there is a spectrum of addictions indulged in because of ignorance or misinformation that a human cannot go through a lifetime without falling prey to. The truth is that when you are confronted with it, if you are confronted with it, and then confronted with it, and confronted with it, even lifetime after lifetime, and you refuse it, the amount of effort it takes to not experiment is less effort than experimenting and then withdrawing from it. It doesn't do any good to not participate if you haven't learned the lessons. The same muscle hasn't been developed against that drug that would be developed if you had given into it, participated in it, gotten totally addicted to it, and then had to withdraw from that addiction with the help of asking to withdraw from or get out of that addiction. So unfortunately, here we had to face the issue of some real no-nos. Wow. I mean, they're talking about some stuff they think is very serious sinful activity. And he says some real no-nos. I also think it's interesting, this concept of, well, we had to actually participate because overcoming, learning to rely on your Father, learning that this way of life that Lucy wants for us is counterfeit. That's actually the important lesson. So as much as we don't want to participate in these activities, we actually all have to. We have to really participate in them so we can overcome, so we can spiritually grow. What actually came to mind as I was reading this was about Rasputin, and he was part of this Khlisti sect. Not too sure on the pronunciation, did my best here. But basically, they believed that they had to overcome sin through this physical exhaustion. And this included things like self-flagellation and also sex magic or engaging in so much sex. So this was like a sex magic cult that some people refer to it as. That's what this is really reminding me of, that we have to sin so we can overcome. So even this idea, it does sound a little intense, but it's not even his own unique idea or his own unique approach to Christianity. It reminds me of when atheists say, well, I have to sin, otherwise Jesus's crucifixion was for nothing. Let's get back to resurrection, your possible resurrection. As far as I can tell, what I have been given says that if you can see the kingdom of heaven, if you can see the truth or reality in what is coming through this vehicle, it is not of this vehicle, it is not me, but it has been given to me, and even says, now that it has been given to you, it's yours. But any of us can abuse it. Any of us can twist it, can take responsibility for it. We can think, boy, look at what good ideas I came up with. And the moment we think that way and we don't give credit to the source, don't forget, information comes from two sources, from our Father's kingdom or from misinformation. And when I receive it, if I make the mistake of taking credit for it, I'm starting to separate at that point. As far as I can tell, the information that has been given to me through T, through our Father's kingdom says, if you recognize this information, you have been in the kingdom of heaven. Oh wow, that's a nice thought. Yes, you have been in the kingdom of heaven. If nothing more than saved on ice for this time, you've been in the kingdom of heaven. And now that you've come back, and in a sense, you're standing outside of the vehicle, trying to use that vehicle. You've probably picked one with the help of our Father's kingdom. You probably picked a vehicle that might be open to being accepted of this information so that you can then try to move into that vehicle. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean you're a vehicle robber? You're a body snatcher? No, our Father's kingdom assigned you that vehicle. They even assigned you that vehicle to a degree at its inception, and you've been checking on it from time to time, relating to it from time to time, until this time, until you start to hear this information. And at that time, you start relating it to this degree, it then becomes your task to start to get into that vehicle. So this is the part that is interesting, because there was a question about this that I had earlier in the book, about this idea that people are born and then eventually somebody from the kingdom of heaven comes and takes over. Is this the mind that takes up occupying the soul that is piloting the vehicle? So there's a separate soul piloting the vehicle, and then you, as a resurrected member of the kingdom of heaven, or resurrected potential member of the kingdom of heaven, you then go and become the mind in the soul in the vehicle? And then that brings us to the next question of, well, then who's actually piloting the vehicle? Is it the owner of the soul, or are you trying to pilot the vehicle yourself as inhabiting the soul as part of that mind? Or are you just really, really, really influential to that particular soul, so it makes the choices for you to make? I think this does sound like a vehicle robber. It's basically saying they're using any of our bodies that have been specially prepped. But in what way? Did that person not have a soul and it was just sort of a NPC until it became inhabited? But it says that you probably picked one with the help of our Father's kingdom. You picked a vehicle that might be open to being accepting of this information so that you can then try to move into that vehicle. Now remember, they're not saying picked a person, but that is what they mean. So it's a person who already has a soul, who already has a mind. Well, not a mind, but a set of thinking and decision-making processes. Because mind here is the creator's mind or Lucifer's mind. So you pick a person who has their own free will, and then you co-occupy that vehicle, because you still need to finish your vehicular work to overcome the vehicle's desires before you can move into the kingdom of heaven. This really sounds like a very clunky way they tried to explain something they probably said early on, that that T was being inhabited by the one who also inhabited Jesus Christ. And I think they maybe said that without much thought beyond it. And then this got adopted into the theology, and that it applied to all the students, and they had to figure out a way to explain it, because this does sound like a vehicle robber or a body snatcher. I can remember so well that when T and I were first working with our students, when we had taken them out of the world, separate and in isolation, and we were getting down to the nitty-gritty, the information kept coming through our heads, and we would say to them, "Get in your vehicle. Susie, get in your vehicle. Johnny, get in your vehicle." Because anytime we would hear something that we knew was not an example of the knowledge of the kingdom of heaven, then they were not in their vehicles. Someone else was speaking. So our hope and our prayer for your sake is that you will start getting into that vehicle. You will start warding off all the bombardment that you will begin to hear that says, "Boy, this guy's crazy. Is this a cult? Is this a cult if I ever heard of one?" Yes, it is a cult. I mean, it's the cult of cults. It's the cult of truth. And we know what the world would like to do with it. We know that nothing can happen to us. I have nothing to fear if I am a child of my heavenly Father, nor do you. But are you going to be satisfied with just being a child of your heavenly Father? Or are you going to take advantage of an opportunity to overcome the world with the help that T has sent to you so that you can enter his kingdom and not need to return? The only reason he gave us instruction to give you these sessions and these classrooms was to offer you a second resurrection, a chance to come in, finish your task, and enter his kingdom. I see that we're down to 5 seconds. Well, we'll see you in our next session. I think like a lot of these, I feel this ending would have been better at the beginning. I think this possibly this entire last paragraph could have been at the beginning and kind of prepped us for what was going to be said. I mean, what did we really learn in this session 3 besides, yeah, write a freaking script already? What did we really learn? We learn about the soul and the mind and what that means, how they really differentiate vehicle, that there's vehicles in the kingdom of heaven that don't corrupt unless they become, or unless they venture outside. That Lucifer's kingdom still has some vehicles, but they're sort of like Model T in level and in understanding, but they're still better than what we have on Earth. This was a lot about bodies. So I would say compared to the other sessions, at least that he did seem to stay on a pretty consistent topic. So I do appreciate that, but I think he could have tackled a lot more questions if he would have just written a damn script or some notes or something. One thing I do think is pretty interesting is the concept of purity or virginity, not just related to sex, but I guess in a general concept of just being in a state where you physically have abstained from sin. It's interesting they don't value that. They value overcoming. They value the process and all the lessons and all of the willpower associated with overcoming these sinful urges. That virginity is like almost a childlike state in a negative sense. It's that you are weak. You've never been tempted. You don't have to overcome. So you don't even know if you're able to overcome should something sway you in the future. So I do think that's an interesting one that they added. I also think it did leave us with that question about the female members and what they did to stop their reproductive hormones. So I tried finding some more information about it, and it seems that the overall hormones that includes in people who also did not undergo the castration, the hormones were partly controlled by their diet. This very, very low calorie diet, they were not able to basically produce enough of their sex hormones. Most of what I've heard about the Heaven's Gate diet is referring to the Master Cleanse. Many of you have probably heard of the Master Cleanse. This is something you basically make at home with a bunch of water, and you add to it cayenne pepper, maple syrup, and unfortunately lemons, which now means it's a type of lemonade that they drink. Now, this is a fad diet that you're basically supposed to just drink for a few days, but some people reportedly on in the Heaven's Gate cults, they were consuming it for a very significant amount of time. However, I did come across a different diet that they did follow early on, and they actually produced a book. It's called the Transfiguration Diet. I couldn't find a free PDF to read, so I ended up buying it, and I'm probably going to read it for the cult members, for anyone that's interested. I do like the name of the author. It's a company. It's Little Green Incorporated, like Little Green Men, or Little Green Inc.'s think tank. So I do think that is kind of cute. You know, it's a nice nod to what they're about. And yeah, I'm really interested in what this diet even is. And we could probably, run some numbers and try to figure out just how much of a caloric deprivation these individuals were in, and then just some of the side effects that come with that by just checking out things like the Minnesota starvation experiment. So I think that'll be a really good read. I'll have to grab it the next time that I'm in the States just to save on some shipping. But then again, if I want to save my back, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But we'll definitely get into it. I think that'll be an interesting one. I don't know why I just like to have these collections of publications made by the Heaven's Gate group. I've already just got the one, and I want everything they've made. With that being said, I am interested in what you guys have to think about in terms of what dough could have meant, or how you interpreted the concept of the vehicle, the soul, and the mind. But more importantly, the concept of the mind affecting the soul in the sense of the individual. How do we phrase this? So the individual who had a previous incarnation and currently they're hanging out, not totally accepted by the kingdom of heaven. They've still got some overcoming to do. So they're waiting for a prepared vehicle. When the prepared vehicle is ready, is that prepared vehicle a separate soul or not? Is it an NPC? But that wouldn't make any sense, right? Because T and Doe had to overcome their own emotions and feelings and urges as Bonnie Nettles, as Marshall Applewhite. And in that process of overcoming the physical desires of the vehicle, in making those choices, they got closer to being in the kingdom of heaven. They were inhabited by people from that kingdom, such as the one who inhabited Jesus. But it means that before this cohabitation, the beings, the personalities, whatever you want to call it, the souls that were in control of the vehicles, they were the ones making choices. They were the ones making choices either to seek, they were making choices to indulge. They were making all of these choices already. And it says in the book that they were sort of pre-programmed to be receptive to hearing the message from the kingdom of heaven. So once they started to kind of tune in, so to speak, and they started to become ready to be co-inhabited, I mean, that must mean that the one who is Marshall and the one who is Doe are basically separate individuals. That the one who is Doe, who is a reincarnated concept, trying to fix the little major things in this time at the end of the age. That one is co-inhabiting when Marshall Applewhite was around 40. And then Applewhite himself is his own person. And Doe is helping Applewhite overcome, just like T was helping Nettles overcome. So who's in charge of the vehicle is my question. I can even go as far as to accept, okay, there's two souls inhabiting the same vehicle, but then the question becomes, all right, well then who's in charge? Because Applewhite still has free will and Doe still has free will. That's the issue. Doe is here to kind of make some, final upgrades so Doe can now graduate and get a next level kingdom vehicle. Doe probably doesn't have a whole lot of urges, but can still indulge if Doe chooses to do that. But then so can Applewhite. And Applewhite is not as ascended as Doe. He's not as close as close to receiving a vehicle in the kingdom above human, so in the kingdom of heaven. So the question is, if they're both cohabiting this vehicle, if Applewhite decides to indulge in a sin, does that set Doe back? Because now Doe, as a co-inhabitor, gets to still experience all of the feelings and the indulgence and the proclivity to become re-addicted to things like alcohol, drugs, and sex, right? And if Doe, in a moment of weakness, decides to use the vehicle to indulge in something, does Applewhite get set back? I guess that's why they started mutilating the vehicle. But do you see what I'm saying? Because they're both co-pilots of the same vehicle. I guess it is kind of like that, right? If they're co-pilots of the same vehicle, if one person decides to steer the vehicle into a detour, both pilots go on the detour, right? If the other pilot decides to land without checking and they end up crashing and damaging the vehicle, both pilots are now left with a crash and a damaged vehicle. So how is that not vehicle robbing? Is it because the vehicle was prepared in advance? Is it because Applewhite accepted Doe to enter and become a co-pilot? I want to say, I hope you guys understand what I'm saying, and I'm sorry if this is confusing, but no, it is confusing. It's gonna be confusing because it doesn't make a whole ton of sense. and we're not really able to ask any questions. Now, after I do finish this book, if we have questions, I do want to pose those questions to the person that you can email. The way that I even got this book at all is you have to email somebody through the or you can email them through the website, but you have to send cash, US dollars, to this PO box, and the recipient and the person who is replying to the emails, which they reply to their emails very fast. That person is known as Tela. I don't know if it's a corporation name. I don't know if it's a pseudonym. I don't know, but Tela. So I don't want to ask Tela a bunch of questions that can be answered in the book. So if these are some things that we can't answer with the book, then I would like to ask Tela those questions. And if you guys have questions too, once we get to the end, we can ask Tela and just see what they say. So if this question doesn't get answered, if it remains a question, then we can pose that question to someone who was part of the group. This Tela was part of the Heaven's Gate group. They are not accepting new members. Not sure how or why Tela was left behind, but they control the domain of Heaven's Gate and the publications. I mean, they can't be making that much money, right? So I wonder what this individual is doing. Yeah, I don't want to pry. Obviously, it's their own privacy. I don't want to pry into it, but I do wonder, do they have a regular job? You know, do they have regular friends, or they just live in a cabin in the woods, just living off the land? You know, don't know. Anyway, if you guys made it this far, if you could put a little alien emoji and like a car emoji, that would be good. And that's of course if you guys haven't other things that you do want to say, because we do want to give our tithing to the almighty algorithm, of course. With that being said, if you would like to give tithings to me, you may do so with things like a super thanks, or you can join the cult. If you want to join the cult, you can do that either here on YouTube as a member, or you can do it on Patreon. Both ways, it's as little as $1 a month, and you get access to everything that I post, whether it's just updates, different YouTube shorts, things like, hey, I want to read this separate book, and of course our monthly cult membership. It's a live stream that we have. I always say it's going to be at least an hour long. It ends up being like 6 hours long. And we just hang out and have a good time because life is stressful, and this is just a nice place to de-stress, watch some Superbook and djinn possessions and all sorts of things, just to have a good laugh and just see what else is going on in different parts of the world and different people's brains. With that being said, as always, thanks for listening.
If you're ready for next level, there is no other time. It's time.